Hey everybody, On the Run at Beards and Dunn is back for another episode. And we have a guest. We just love having guests because we get so many great stories from the day, back in the day of running. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Jeff Benjamin. And now, for a lot of people, they might go, Jeff Benjamin, is he a famous runner? I don't know if I remember Jeff Benjamin. And he's famous in the running circles, but probably not, we'll talk about this. Jeff is a runner and a pretty good runner. Ran on it sounded like a state championship high school team, and was a road racer. And he is a track fan beyond my belief. I've met a few good track fans. Brad Court is a friend of mine who's gone to multiple Olympic trials and Olympic games, and as a lover, loves the sport of track and field and road racing. I think Jeff would put him to shame. I'm going to do a quick little bio here on Jeff. Jeff is a retired New Dorp. I've never heard New Dorp High School history teacher. This makes sense because his history of running is extensive. Former track and cross country coach, has written more than 30 years for American Track and Field magazine, along with a runbloodrun.com. He is also a columnist for SILive.com's monthly On the Run column, which began in 2017. That's going on for a while. Former president of the Staten Island Athletic Club with a fifth man scoring for his 1982 Citizen Wagner High School New York Cross Country City Championship team. I love that. I never was on a state championship team. He is also a member of the College of Staten Island Sports Hall of Fame for cross country and currently teaches college courses at sports business management at his alma mater. And he works as an instructor at a Job Corps. And I even worked as an instructor at a Job Corps in the 82 to 89. And we could talk about that maybe some other time. A passionate follower of the sport of running. His subjects have included, now hang on everybody, Sebastian Coe, Jim Spivey, Joe Rudin, a famous coach, Tom Fleming, one of my heroes, Bill Rodgers, Marty Liquori, Rod Dixon, Jim Ryan, Bob Beamon, the former world record holder, is a long jump, Dave Wottle, as well as book reviews, articles covering meets, races in the Northeast. In 2023, Jeff was honored with the Annual James Dunaway Award by Track and Field Writers Association for Journalism Excellence. Wow. That's
welcome, Jeff.
And what really intrigued Dick and I to have you on our podcast is your Facebook postings. I love going to your Facebook and just looking at the photos because Jeff has photos of himself, and he's going to have to explain this to me how many years these go back to, of just about any famous track and field athlete you can name. I'll be surprised if Jeff hasn't met them. And so I'm assuming we've got some stories of some relationships, and I know we do, that we're going to get into. Now, the $1,000 question, Jeff. Dick Beardsley. I haven't seen too many pictures of you and Dick Beardsley together. What's the problem here?
I could stand proud with a lot of great runners that I never caught Dick Beardsley. and there's a great story with that as well. I started running in 1981. I entered a 5-mile road race on Staten Island, put on by the New York Road Runners and Manufacturers Hanover, which Dick probably
yes.
Wonderful lady Barbara Paddock, who's still with us. And I knew nothing. And this short guy with a beard said, "Hey, you want to join me? I'm looking to break 40 minutes for 5 miles. That's 8 minutes a mile." So I said, sure. Beginner runner, ran it. So the good news is I ran like 38:44.
Nice.
But the bad news is this little guy jumped in front of me and ran 38:43, and that guy was Fred LeBeau.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. And somebody told me it was one of Fred's best races he ever ran. And after that, I kind of was learning the sport. But Fred took a ton of people under his wing. He took me under his wing with other people and stuff. So I was involved. In the 90s, I was in charge of garbage cleanup at the start of the New York City Marathon at Fort Wadsworth.
Wow.
And, Fred made arrangements to have nonprofits, kids groups, key clubs, track teams, choirs, etc. If they came and cleaned up, they got paid for their organizations from Fred. Fred did that. And I said, Fred was kind of like my first door. But my first coach in road racing, I didn't start with my high school team right away. My first coach was the legendary Staten Islander named Art Hall. Art Hall was an African-American distance runner who ran 2:22 at Boston. And as Catherine Switzer wrote in her book, in the 70s, she'd be running in Central Park and seeing this lean, thin African-American guy running. and you didn't see many African American
No.
people running. And Art Hall said, he goes, yeah, when you joined the track team as a kid back then, they looked at you. He said, oh, you black? Okay, jump and sprint. But he wanted to do that. And Art fell in with Gary Corbett and Ted Corbett. In 1974, a very hot New York City marathon, 4 loops in Central Park, Art's running. He sees this runner who had taken the lead on the ground, totally exhausted in the upper end of the park. And Art said, get up, you got to get up and run. And he got him across the finish line, and that was Bill Rodgers, who Art beat.
Oh, wow.
In 74, before Bill was Bill. But
right.
Talking with Art, and Art passed away sadly in 2009. But talking with Art, Art would say, listen, he goes, I was trying to help out the guy, but you got to understand something. This is 1974 New York City. Here's a white guy in Upper Manhattan down on the ground. I had to get him up. And Bill was
survival.
That. Bill gives great credit to Art. There was an article written here for the local SI Live, said the day Art Hall saved American marathoning. So like I said, I fell in with the sport and stuff. And then my senior year of high school, I did run for my high school team. And for the younger runners out there, being the 5th man on a city cross-country championship team is great, because whenever you come for a reunion with the guys, you never pay for dinner. They pay everything. Okay? So you're the 5th person. Without you, you're kind of like the weakest link, but still is leads to the strength. And during indoor season, my first indoor season, I wasn't running well. And my coach started doing some Arthur Lydiard drills and stuff like that. And I also started going to Nautilus weight training twice a week. And a lot of runners did not do that back then, as aware. And I wound up running really well. I wound up running up in 1983 at the Island Champs. I finished second in the 600 meters, running 127, where I actually ran 29 each 200. And the number one guy on my team for that was a guy, Vinny Giles, who still coaches in our community. Great coach. And Vinny ran a 121. Everybody went out with him, and I just stayed pace. And I nailed everybody, and did my job. And the next day at the coaches' meeting, Dick, my coach at the time, Steve Zaccarello, starts giving out MVP stuff. Steve Zaccarello worked at Super Runner's Shop with Gary Murphy at the time.
Sure.
And Zach pulled out a poster and said, Jeff, this is for you for your performance. And it was the New Balance poster of Dick leading Alberto Salazar that said,
no way.
There.
That's a great story.
That up on my wall was really great.
Wow.
And a year earlier, I actually did watch the race in that era before the modern technology, which some people find, the younger people will find incomprehensible. The fact is that we had to wait in New York till 11 o'clock at night for Channel 5 to show a replay of the Boston Marathon. We knew Alberto had won during the day, but there was nothing about the drama and the competition of that day. So watching it that night from like 11 o'clock to 1:30 in the morning was like unreal, just unreal. And, you've heard this a million times. You gave it your all that day, and it's just very, very remarkable. But I'm always, I love for our paths to eventually cross one of these days, and I'm sure.
I hope so, Jeff.
And,
yeah.
And I was up in Boston this past weekend, and if you want to see this, I got this thing.
Oh, nice.
Right. The Greater Boston Track Club invited me to they wanted to remember the 50th anniversary of Bill Rodgers, groundbreaking win in 75. And Bill and I go back a long time through Art Hall. And Bill invited me, and I went, and they had these custom shirts. And
nice.
It was a great event. And I basically, I went up there. I do write for Larry Eder at runblogrun.com.
Oh, yeah, I know Larry.
Yes. And, I basically was up there with Larry, but my goal was to cover Bill on his 50th, all the events he did. And the one thing Bill did that was really great, he made sure that the wheelchair athlete, Bob Hall, who was the only wheelchair athlete back then, would be honored as well because it was his 50th anniversary. And Bob used a wheelchair just like a hospital wheelchair in 1975.
Jeff, in 1982, I don't know if it was Bob, but I remember Salazar and I are going up Heartbreak Hill, and I'm in the lead, and Alberto's right behind me, and I look up the hill and I see this guy in a wheelchair, and I'm thinking, and it's a hospital wheelchair is what it looks like. I'm thinking he misses one stroke, he's going back down the hill, and it so inspired me that I actually ran out of my way. I ran over to him and patted him on his back and said, "Good job, buddy." And then I got back over on the right side of the road. Cool. I'll never forget that.
That's cool. And Bob was very touched, and Bill really went to bat for him to make sure that he got his just due as well.
You
and if
bet.
you did watch the Boston Marathon yesterday, you might have seen Bill and Bob jog like the last 100 yards, prior to the winners coming in the ceremony to the finish line together. And, Bob Hall was also a member of Greater Boston Track Club.
Right.
Which is really, really cool. So, but like I said, throughout the years, I've interviewed, but I've also met a lot of people. And, it's one of those things. It's like, somebody who knows somebody who gets you in. And I've been very blessed to keep these relationships and friendships through the years with the names you mentioned and other people as well. And one thing I do on Staten Island, I was Staten Island Athletic Club president in the 90s for a while. But about 6 years ago, my friend Michael Schnall and I created the Staten Island Running Association. And we're a nonprofit that gives back to the community. We're very shoestring and grassroots, but we do a dinner every year in November or October. It's always the Wednesday before the New York Marathon. We have 150 kids, high school and under, who come to the dinner for free. Sponsors pay for them.
Wow.
And we've had Rod Dixon, Steve Jones, Eamon Coughlin, Jeff Smith, Bill Rodgers, Ajay Wilson, Frank Shore. And last year we had Joni Benoit come. And I call it the Beatlemania effect. What we do is that at the dinner, and a lot of these kids don't know who these people are.
No.
What happens is we said, all right, what girls here run distance? And if you ever want to Google Staten Island Running Association dinner gala, there are photos and all that stuff. So about 60 girls came up who like to run distance. Then we brought Joni up. Then we showed a two-minute video of her winning the Olympic gold medal in '84. And then I discussed her world record, where I said the time, 2 hours, 23 minutes, etc. But girls didn't get that. And I said, girls, I go, that's 5:36 a mile. Then they're like, oh my God.
Right.
When that presentation was over, then they wanted autographs, selfies, photos, the whole deal.
Sure.
And, we do that with the people we bring in. And Eamon Coughlin was funny. He came to our dinner in 2019. He was like, I thought this was just going to be a bunch of old guys hanging out. And we showed the video of him breaking 3:50 for the mile, the world record back in '83, the indoor world record.
Yeah.
And we hyped it up. Do you guys think Eamon could do it? And once the video was shown, once again, they were all over him. So, it was really great. And I'm lucky. I get sponsors. People cover them for whatever they show up. And my best friend I grew up with, who we're still best friends to this day, Tony Galata, ran for Port Richmond High School here in Staten Island, then went to Mansfield University, where he was coached by Ed Winrow, who was a top 10 marathoner in the 60s, early 70s. And Tony has done very well in life, and Tony is very generous with helping us out with getting a lot of these people in. And Tony and I, have traveled around. We've met these people. And once again, I get a lot of suggestions from a lot of people. Oh, we should bring in this person, try to bring in that person. But respectfully, if I can get somebody to cover them, then, we can work with it, like we can cover like hotel. I can pick people up at the airport, which I've done, stuff like that. And the other thing is having it the Wednesday before the New York Marathon on Staten Island kind of starts New York City Marathon week, where the New York City Marathon does begin on Staten Island. And a lot of the guests who come, like Joni and Bill and everybody, they're already in New York anyway. So the travel expense is not that bad.
Right.
The opportunity for the youth to see these people and to see them in the flesh, so to speak, and to interact with them. You can't bottle that. That's that's inspiration is worth more than money to a lot of people, and I agree with that. And being up at Boston this weekend, it was really great. And I'll show you a little doodad here. I had my old friend sign his Life magazine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
1972.
I have a second house out in Hershey, Pennsylvania. My wife and I go to antique stores. I saw this for sale for $5 2 weeks ago.
Oh my!
And I have one somewhere in my madness of stuff. I'm not like the late great Mike Finelli, who had everything, but I have stuff. And I was like, well, I might see Frank anyway at Boston. Let me buy it. So I lucked out with that, right? And then I saw our old Staten Island supporter. Right?
Yeah, there you go. There's Joni.
And just to give you an idea, the top American woman this year at Boston, her name was, I want to make sure I get the name right, Jess McClain. She finished 7th overall, running the exact time that Joni ran for her world record in '83.
Right.
Which is pretty amazing. And then, of course, I got this thing.
There's old Bill.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yep. So
that's
like I said,
amazing.
Other stuff added to the crazy collection. And who knows whatever's going to happen with this collection? I have no idea. But like I said, I've been very lucky in my life finding running, which I think with a lot of people would agree, we find running, and it's almost like a salvation kind of thing. Where else would we be? What would we be doing? That kind of stuff. And I honestly feel 99.99% of the people we meet are cool people.
You bet.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's not people who are beyond wealthy and have money, and they're wondering if we're going to take money from them or leech on them, so to speak. Like NBA players and stuff like that, which is unfortunately, I do think that America's runners should be paid and compensated a lot more.
Oh, way more.
And Dick, your time with the under the table stuff, and
right.
I know a lot of stories of runners who ran in Europe, and just like in those mafia movies, they're coming back home and they're taping the money to their stomach to walk through customs back then.
I had some taped to my legs.
He has a story.
Some kind of nasty U.S. government, USA track and field official will corner them at a meet in Oslo and be like, "You better give me 20% right now, or I'm going to spill the beans on you." What do you do? There's a lot of that crazy stuff that went on in that era with the hypocrisy of amateur athletics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and my coach later on was Tom Fleming, Mike, and so Tom became part of my family, and he's sorely missed to this day. His anniversary his passing was 2 days ago, and Tom was just unreal, and he opened tremendous doors for my family and I as well. And those are things, like I said, you can't bottle. Those are things that are wonderful in this life, and we've been very lucky. And I know we had mentioned Joe Newton before. It was Joe Newton who got me introduced to Sebastian Coe back in 1991.
Wow.
Dick is probably aware of this. I don't know if Mike is as well. Seb Coe was a competitor. Okay. Mm-hmm. What that meant when he competed is that he didn't kind of make friends with anybody. Okay.
No.
Herb Elliott, the great miler, was the same way. Percy Cerity, made sure that Herb Elliott didn't become buddy-buddy with anybody, stuff like that. And Seb in 1984 was coming off injury and illness. He was selected for the team for the Olympic Games to defend his title in the 15 and try to win the 8, where he got a silver in 80. And the British press were like, they were destroying him. One guy actually wrote that maybe he's recovering from HIV with his.
Oh gosh,
it was crazy. And Seb later on said, he goes, "My father was my coach." He said the hardest thing I had to tell him was, "I got to get away from this here. I got to get the hell out of here." And they had met Joe Newton 5 months earlier at a clinic in Illinois and traveled around with Joe for Foot Locker. And Peter arranged for Seb to stay 3 weeks with Joe Newton. And not only that, but Mike Durkin, the great Olympian, 1500 meter man, the animal as he's called, his brother John Durkin was the preeminent podiatrist for track and field and running. John Durkin passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, but one of his assistants was Dr. Richard Braver, who still practices in New Jersey and still gets some of America and the world's greatest runners coming into him. And Seb came in, and they helped Seb, with like a slip-on into the foot, little felt thing. They videoed Seb. What they did was they carried a very heavy camcorder. It is 1984.
Right.
Running behind Seb, going like this to see his gait, his form. And Durkin was able to take that and work wonders. And Joe, being the master motivator, all positive, Seb got the silver in the 8 and got the gold again in the 1500 in a great race. And when in 1990-91, Dick, I don't know if you were there, but Runner's World had the 25th anniversary gala in New York.
Yeah, what year was that?
91. It was like
91. Yeah.
Thing. Yeah, I mean, I saw some people, but I didn't see everybody. But,
no, I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, so Joe called Peter and Seb ahead of time to say, "Hey, there's this guy, Jeff Benjamin. He's cool. I'm happy I lived up to the reputation, and they welcomed me into their orbit. And I've been politically speaking, I've been a big, staunch supporter of Seb for years now. And the one thing I learned about Seb, he's in it to win it. And I always bring up in 2006 when they were selecting for the 2012 Olympic Games, New York had Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire mayor, who probably threw money left and right. But I was telling people, you don't understand. These IOC members, they get off the plane in London, they know Seb Coe. They have a bond with him. It's not about the money. It's not, it's not about that. And London got the games, and I knew London was going to get the games. People thought I was nuts, but I'm like, no, you have Seb in charge. And as you all know, Seb has run World Athletics, basically taking it from the dumps and the corruption that was there and bringing it back Some of his policies haven't been perfect. He throws ideas out at the wall, looking to see things that stick and try to get reaction from people. But, he's still there, and he just ran for IOC leadership, as you know, where he unfortunately did not win.
Oh, I was wondering. So he did not win.
No. Christine Coventry, a swimmer from Mozambique, I believe. I think it's Mozambique, I'm not sure. One of the African countries.
Okay.
Longtime associate of Thomas Bach, the first woman to win that election.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I honestly feel, Seb definitely went all out. And like I said, from the competitor to the person running World Athletics and stuff, Seb has developed almost like a Fred LeBeau quality of meeting people, speaking with them, being sincere, and politicking as well, but genuine. And Seb appeared at the Milrose Games last year in 2024, and I saw him hanging out with old fans, our age, high school kids, and speaking with some 8-year-old kid for 20 minutes, which is something he didn't have to do. And,
no.
Like I said, Seb not getting the job, he only joined the IOC as a committee member 2 or 3 years ago. And I honestly feel, and we're seeing this right now with the death of the Pope, the Vatican and the IOC have a lot of weird inner workings in the political world. And what Americans always have to realize is that it's not a democracy. It's not like how we do American politics here. It is very, very weird in IOC. And Coventry, I believe Bach wanted her, and Bach got her.
Yeah.
So, but Seb still has a couple more years to go. I think he is term limited with World Athletics, but I think he has 2 more years to serve. So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, like I said, just been right place, right time, meeting great people. Everybody's cool. I always tell people whenever I interview, I'm always like, if you feel uncomfortable with a question I have to answer, just say no comment, or we'll just move on from it. So just cool. Very, very lucky. Very, very lucky.
Do you know Tony Rivas? Do you know Tony?
Tony Revis?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you and him you two would be a powerful force.
Oh, yeah, no, we
no
talk.
Kidding.
We talk. We're at it for an hour and a half.
Because you remind me of that, because when he starts talking about, how to make American distance running better as a sport, as a culture, whatever, he is so passionate and has some very, you and him, like I said, you'd be the dynamic duo.
Oh, no, Tony, Larry Rawson, these guys are benchmarks that I hope to at least touch one day. What they know is just unreal. And it's funny you bring about support. There was an article this morning. Rich Perlman has a daily email called the Sports Examiner. It's about all Olympic stuff, but he also puts a lot of running stuff. And the Laureus Awards were held for the outstanding Olympic athletes in Switzerland. Very prestigious. I think in Monaco, actually. And Mondo Duplantis won, the pole vault.
Yes, right.
But Edwin Moses is a member of Laureus, and Edwin gave an interview where he was talking about track and field athletes should unionize. And I know a few years ago, Sha'Carri Richardson wrote about that as well. I forget the book, but a guy wrote a book on when track and field and runners tried to unionize between 79 and 81, 82. Dick might have been part of that.
I kind of remember that, yeah.
Yeah. And, the one thing I learned is that it's very hard, because if you're the number 1 miler in America, do you really want to throw a bone to the number 10 miler in America? In the spirit of brotherhood and love, yeah, but we're talking about full-blown out competition, And I'm very well aware that during that time when the off-the-book amateur stuff was starting to move professionally with the organization called TAC, which is now USATF, and Olin Cassell and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the great American runners decided they didn't want to be in the union, and they cut their own deal with Olin Cassell and TAC. So it wasn't united, And
right.
Unions throughout American history, you got to be united. And I don't know if we have that with track and field and running at this point. I just don't know.
Think of track athletes are so, runners, especially distance runners, so individualized. You're out there by yourself, and you do it on your own. And if you have a coach, you're fortunate.
Right.
You may have a teammate that's a training partner. That seems to be the way it's going now with these groups that are getting together and forming teams.
But it's interesting you bring that up, because you look at Cole Hocker, the Olympic gold medalist at 1500 last year. Cole trains way out in West Virginia somewhere, Western Virginia, not West Virginia, Western Virginia, kind of by Lynchburg, but further out. He has his crew. He doesn't have teammates who are trying to make the team with him. Their job is to be with Cole to make Cole better.
Yeah.
Seb Coe had the same arrangement with some people. It's like when Michael Jordan would bring people in to do 3-on-3 on his property, as an off training thing. You are there to help him. You are there to make him better. And like to get the unification thing is very, very difficult.
Dick Beardsley had Mike Dunlap to dirt around the trails of Minnesota once in a while, just to anyway.
Mike, he was my punching bag.
There you go. You had to be the sparring partner, the guy who's the old plug away.
Right.
And let's talk about some athletes that you've gotten to know over the years.
Sure.
Rod Dixon, we spoke briefly. How did you come across Rod?
Back in like 82, 83, 84, there was a race called the Asbury Park 10K. I don't know. Dick probably was never there. I would have remembered, but I'm not sure. But the race drew thousands of runners, and they had some world-class runners. Matter of fact, the race lasted through the early 90s. And I'm a young runner. It's 83, and Rod Dixon won the 10K, and he was signing posters after the race. Yeah. I got my poster signed. He was really like typical Rod, very encouraging, very, positive-minded, the whole thing. And then lo and behold, 3 months later, he runs the New York City Marathon and wins in one of the most dramatic finishes ever in marathon history, beating the gutsy Jeff Smith, right? Who threw, and if you remember, Jeff, I think it was mile 16, threw in like a 4:20 mile down First Avenue. I mean, it was just astounding. And so I remember seeing Rod there. Then I saw Rod at the Runner's World dinner in '91, and it was one of those things like he always knew me by face, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, what happened was, I said, saw him through the years, saw him at a lot of New York City Marathon expos and stuff like that. And, always gracious, always talking and stuff. And eventually we hit it off. There's a race in Connecticut called the Litchfield Hills Road Race. It was created by Billy Neller and Joe Concannon. And they wanted to do a race like Falmouth. They always went to Falmouth and said, why don't we do a Falmouth race up here? And the Litchfield Hills Road Race, which is held, I think, on the third Sunday or second Sunday of June, at 1:00 in the afternoon. Okay.
It's an 8 mile. Is it an 8 miler?
It's 7.1 like Falmouth.
7.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what adds to the luster of the race is that at the 6 mile mark, there's a hill called Gallows Hill. 200 years ago, they used to hang people at the top of the hill. And
oh my!
When you run Gallows Hill, you feel like you're being hung because the grade. It's also where it's located. 6 mile mark. You're running at 2:00 in the afternoon on a June day.
Yeah.
And the hill goes like this. And Gallows Hill has been rated by Runner's World as one of the toughest running hills of road races in America. And the race gets thousands of people. And Rod was up there. Rod had created something called the Rod Dixon Kids Marathon, which I'm sure if you've had him on, he talked about. Yep. Very prominent in Connecticut. It was also prominent for a while in L.A. Texas school districts had it, stuff like that. And Rod and I hit it off from day one with that. And like I said, Rod is probably the closest person in my running world, with Bill Rodgers a very close second behind that. But I know because of Bill's personality, everybody says, oh, yeah, but Bill's like that with everybody, which is true. And Bill does remember mostly everybody, which is great. But yeah, so like I said, Rod Dixon, we go back, and that's our kind of start.
Nice.
And I brought these people to Staten Island through the years too for 5K charity races and stuff. So Rod has run it. Craig Virgin has come. Bill has been there. Frank Shorter has come. So, but now we do a Memorial Day run, but we don't bring in anybody of note. But we save everything for the dinner, so to speak, with Dave Wottle and Beamon. And
sure. Nice.
So, yeah.
Before I forget, I would highly recommend a guy named Dick Beardsley. He's really good with young people and with runners. And if you show the 9-minute Duel in the Sun from YouTube as the intro, you will have them on the edge of their seats.
Right.
I still get goosebumps every time.
Right. And respectfully, like anything, I get sponsors to cover expenses for people to come in. And if I could secure somebody, or somebody
start working on it, Jeff.
My door is always open. Like I said, for Joni Benoit, I have an unknown benefactor who called me last year and said, "You want Joni?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "But I can't afford her." He goes, "I got it," and he did it.
Nice.
Mention Dick Beardsley to that benefactor and see if
Yeah, but respectfully, to let people know out there, getting these people like Dick and others to see kids, especially to give them the background of the greatness of these people, is a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, it's always tied to economics.
Sure.
And just to let you know too, there's another guy in front of us. Scott Ryder was a national class 800 meter runner from the Midwest in the early 80s. He raced against Coe at an indoor meet in England, where Coe set the world record for 800. It was one of those Great Britain USA meets. And Scott then trained with Santa Monica Track Club with Joe Douglas to try to make the Olympic team in '84. He got injured, and that was the end of his dreams. But about 15 years later, Scott was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Scott was only given 5 years. He's still here. Okay.
Wow.
He said, I've used my mentality as a runner to wake up every day and be dedicated to what I have to do. And Scott has single-handedly raised more money for Parkinson's disease research in America than any lone individual in the country. Like Michael J. Fox has his foundation. Scott just is Scott. And if you Google Scott Ryder, he's big with pickleball. He was portrayed on CBS's Sunday Morning last year. And when Seb heard about it, Seb actually sent him a letter of congratulations. And Scott was like, I was shocked he remembered me because when he set that world record, I was way back, Seb remembers. And Scott not only comes to my dinner every year, but he gets his friends from South Carolina, Ohio to fly in, and he covers Dave Wattle's expenses.
Wow. Nice.
So that's how we work it. And what's really great about our dinner, I have a great group of people who work with me with it. I have local people, Brian Rowan, Michael DeVito Jr., Michael Schnall, Dana Konigsberg, Patricia Mulligan, a few other people. And, we're all full-time people, or retired, we're not a nonprofit that has so much money. And, we share a same dream with this, to get people in. And the dinner right now has reached a proportion where, we have people coming from all over the country just for the dinner.
Wow.
My friend on Facebook, Gary Rush, who's from Canada, if you're friends with him on Facebook.
Yeah.
Gary drove down from Canada for the dinner.
Nice.
And the next day, my friend Tony Galata hosted some of the legendary guests for lunch at the New York Athletic Club. And Joni Benoit said, I'll ride with Gary. And what she didn't realize was Gary didn't have one of those easy pass things for the toll. He had to stop and get money out, And, so that was pretty funny.
Let me drop some more names on you. I saw a photo of you and Lassie Viren. Do you actually know Lassie Viren?
I met Lassie Viren a few times in the early 90s. Tom Fleming introduced me. Lassie was working Finnish Airlines at the Expo booth at the New York City Marathon for 3 years. And Mike and Dick, just to give you an idea, people were walking by. They didn't even know it was him. Who was it? They walked by, when I saw him, Tom was at the Expo. He goes, yeah, Jeff, come on over, introduce you. And, got to meet him and stuff. I've never interviewed him per se. And I was actually looking for him in Paris. I was at the Paris Games. I didn't have a reunion with him, but I did have a reunion with the Moroccan runner Khalid Ska, who I met in '92 at Boston at the World Cross Country Champs. Had lunch with him, and we always kept in touch. And I got to see him again at Paris, which was wonderful. And one guy I've always been in contact with, and we're kind of like friends that had never met, but we finally met, Philbert Bailly, who was a world record holder in the mile, who was at Paris. Got to see him. Lassie was around Paris, but I couldn't find him. So, looked around and everything. So, and I also keep in touch a lot with Billy Mills. Billy was at Paris, and, that's another person I'd love to try to bring to Staten Island eventually.
Yeah, great, wonderful person.
Yeah, he's from South Dakota.
Last year for a solo event, a couple of sponsors covered John Carlos, who came in during Black History Month in February.
Oh, nice.
And John spoke before an elementary school and then spoke with people that night. It was so funny because John did 3 appearances that day, and he was kind of tired after the second one. And the second one, by the way, was at the Ocean Breeze Indoor Track and Field Facility on Staten Island, which is a world-class indoor track facility. Talk to some of the best runners today. They know about the facility. And the USATF Indoors were held there this past February, and they're going to come back next year in February.
Nice.
So we're driving back to the hotel, and John's like, Jeff, this dinner tonight, do I got to speak? I'm kind of tired. I go, yeah, it's no problem. I said, it was intimate, 30 people, meeting you, stuff like that. So I had the dinner. So my friend Vinny Giles, I mentioned before, asked John something about 1968, and John spoke nonstop about everything for an hour and a half. And when he was done, I said, John, I thought you were tired. And he said, Hey, once I get rolling, I get rolling. I go, okay,
There you
that's cool
go.
with me. You know?
I saw a photo of you and Kip Kano. I mean,
Yes,
we're
Kip
going
Kano.
back.
Yes, Kip Kano was a reunion as well. I met him at the Vitalis indoor meet held in the Meadowlands back in the day, and that's where Eamon Coughlin broke his world record for the mile. Wooden track,
Right.
11 laps to the mile, and Kip Kano was there running a Masters race, and I got to speak with him and stuff like that. And I know his son Martin a little bit, who stayed in America for a while. And when I was at Paris, I saw Kip, and he immediately remembered me, which was really great. And also back one of the reasons why I was able to meet runners, Fred LeBeau would call me and be like, "Hey, I got people coming in, for New York Road Runner stuff, or for Milrose stuff, or for indoor stuff, or outdoor stuff." And Fred put on a meet called the New York Games for a while,
Yeah.
in the spring, and had television and everything. So he called me up once and said, "I have a Cuban coach, Alberto Juantorena, coming in. Do you want to pick him up at the airport, one of his athletes?" I go, "Sure." So I picked him up, drove him in, everything was great, and took a picture with him then. And then in 2016 at the Rio Olympics where I was at, I bumped into Juantorena. I go, "I don't know if you remember me." He said, "I'm Jeff Benjamin." He goes, "Yes, the guy who picked me up at the airport in New York." Well, that was cool, cool to be
Yeah.
I do know Alberto Juantorena is battling a lot of health issues. I haven't really heard much, but obviously I think we all wish him the best. Inspiring athlete, big time. And for the younger people, he's the only athlete to ever win the 400 meters and the 800 meters in a world record at the 76 Olympic Games.
Jeff, I got to ask you, did you ever get hooked up with Alberto Salazar, like to do an interview or pictures, stuff like that? Yeah.
Yes. And I have an old Staten Island friend to thank for that. In the late 80s, I had known Alberto through the years, but I had never met him. But I was reading in the Daily News one day by an old columnist, Eddie Coyle, who used to have like a 2-time-a-week running column back then. He said Alberto was coming into the New York Marathon to do like a Sunday mass at the 1990 New York City Marathon on Sunday morning. So I somehow got the phone number for the restaurant he had back then in Eugene.
Yeah.
I called him, and he was very nice. He was like, "Yeah, yeah." And I said, "I'd love to interview you." He goes, "Yeah, yeah. When I come into New York, I'm staying at this hotel." So, he came in, and I called him at the hotel. I got him. He goes, "Yeah, I'm kind of busy right now, but try me tomorrow." And tried him the next day, and there was really no answer. And I was a little depressed. I was like, I guess I'm not going to get him. And I went to New York City Marathon start headquarters where I told you I was working. And the guy in charge of the start was a longtime Staten Islander, 9/11 hero, Vic Navarra. Vic was in charge of the start of the New York City Marathon since 1978. Okay. He passed away from 9/11 related illness in late 2007. His wife, Joanne Navarra, still runs the start. And
wow.
Speaking with Vic, "So what's going on?" I go, I said, "Listen," I'm trying to reach Alberto Salazar, man. He's being a pain in the butt, and everything. And Vic says, "Call him back. You tell him you know me." I go, "Okay." So I called Alberto, and I got him again. I said, "Still want to do this interview." And he actually said to me, he says, "Boy, you're really persistent." I go, "Yeah, well, can you blame me?" And I told him about Vic Navarra. And once he heard Vic, he said, "Vic," goes, "Meet me tomorrow." And Alberto took me out for lunch. We had a great interview.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then we met again at some expos in the late 90s. And then my daughter, Amanda, who worked for Nike for a bunch of years, before she worked for Nike, she was really little. She met Alberto as well. And, I'm very, I said, I know Kara Goucher as well and all that stuff. And all the controversies that have come up, over the past, I guess, decade are just unreal and really tragic. However, I will say firmly, I never saw anything weird. Nothing from him. There was one time I was at the Milrose Games when Alberto was coaching. And Galen Rupp there and Mary Kane and I think Kara. They did those famous post-race workouts.
Right.
And Alberto invited me to watch, which was wonderful. And Galen was actually running 600s after running an American record 3K. And he ran each of those 600s in 1:30, running each 200 in 30 seconds each. And that's great strength and real, this. That's like amazing. And but I also have to tell you, I believe Kara. Respectfully, I do. I know there are some people who fight for the end for Alberto. I get it. You don't want to believe this stuff, but people are complex. Some people are very complex in this world, and sometimes you read about a school teacher has a scandal, and you're working in the school, and you see this every day, and you have no clue that this scandal's going on.
Right.
like, that kind of stuff. And this past weekend, by the way, I did see Kara and Adam Goucher and their son Colt ran like a low 17-minute 5K at the Boston.
Yeah,
he's running good.
like he's grown up now and stuff.
And Kara and Adam would tell me he was pissed because he was looking to run better, but that's more of like a fun run. That's a wave of 10,000 runners and stuff. Kara ran like low 18s,
nice,
which is wonderful for her. And on a Sunday morning, I joined the Heartbreak Running Company Shakedown Run with Bill Rodgers, Galen Rupp, and Courtney Freericks. And went to run with them. And running with Galen was like friggin' awesome, And these shakeout runs the day before the Boston Marathon, you go on the social media, that all the stores do it, all the shoe companies do it. They get hundreds of people.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing,
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And I do have a little bit of an in with Courtney Freericks because Courtney's mom grew up on Staten Island, we found out. So, yeah. And also, I'll throw a name out to Dick. Maybe Mike remembers the great Villanova runner, Kathy Franey.
Yeah.
Now, Kathy Franey Fleming, the wife of Jack Fleming, who's really puts on that Boston Marathon. Big,
right?
Kathy lived for about 9 years on Staten Island. So I like to think their growing years, the water here might have
must be
might have helped them and stuff. But go ahead.
How many Olympic Games have you attended?
I attended the 96 Olympic Games with my wife just as a spectator. I've only been spectators. 96 was Atlanta, then 2016 was Rio, and 2024 was Paris. For me, the greatest experience I ever had was seeing it live in action. Matthew Centrowitz winning the gold medal in the 1500.
That was something.
Yeah, knowing the history, knowing the great milers before him, knowing that Jim Ryan texted him that morning wishing him luck, and that Matthew knew that Jim had gotten a silver. Like Matthew knows the history, and to do that, and then I go back with Matt Sr. a long time. I don't want to share quotes because they're very R-rated. Matt's from the Bronx, and I'll leave it at that. If you know the Bronx, you know what it is. And Matt Sr. has always been around, and he's the kind of guy who'll be like, "What the boop are you doing here?" But then he'll keep much, And we were at the games, and I saw Matt Sr. always around, and Matthew as well, and everything. But when Matt won the gold medal, his father was with the people celebrating. Some of you've seen it on NBC. They were going up to the stands. Then they were like, "Hey, let's go to where the ceremony's taking place. Let's see if we could sneak down." And I'm walking in the hall, and Matt grabs me and goes, "We're gonna go see my son at the ceremony. Come on!" Right? So he dragged me, and that was great. I was 20 yards away from Matthew as Seb Coe gave him the medal, and I wrote about this. It was very quiet and a lot of respect. And Seb's ready to give him the medal. And all of a sudden, I wrote this for Larry Eater in a blog. I go, and a raspy voice, like you're in Yankee Stadium, the Bronx, screams out, "Hey, Seb, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up, Seb." And you can see Seb was ready to like roll over laughing because that was the only voice you heard, But Seb, to his credit, kept his composure somehow, gave him the medal, and said to him, "Welcome to the club," And for me individually, that was like the greatest thing I've ever seen live in track and field or running. I was also with Jim Spivey, very close with Jim Spivey. Watching Jim win the Olympic trials in '92 live at the trials was just astounding as well. And I actually videoed it. There's a bootleg video, as we call it. Jim is in possession of it. It hasn't reached the YouTube channels yet, but eventually will. But my Matthew Centrowitz bootleg video is there. I'm on the back stretch, unfortunately, but it captures, the moments. And, I think Bill Rodgers always said it the best. If you are happy with your accomplishments, that's a great feeling. Whether, you're running 2:08, 2:09 for the marathon, or you're
for sure,
4 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
These are like definitive moments for the individual, for yourselves. And, it's kind of like you're getting the most out of you, what you can get. And we have a Thanksgiving Day race on Staten Island here called the Lou Marley Run. It's been around since 1947. And Lou Marley was a benefactor to the sport, owned the pharmacy. Some of you know your baseball. He played in high school with Hank Greenberg, the great home run hitter, Detroit Tigers. And Mr. Marley got Hank Greenberg and Joe DiMaggio to come to Staten Island in 1948 wearing their uniforms at Clove Lakes Park to meet kids, which is unbelievable. And basically the Lou Marley Run, like a lot of Thanksgiving Day runs, college kids come home, high school kids are there, everybody's there, comes a de facto championship, And I wanted to run. I'd always run like 15:40, 15:30 for 3 miles, which for me, I got the most out of myself. And I was hoping to run 15:20 in 1995. It built up for a year, and Tom Fleming trained me. And mentally, physically, the workouts, he warned me, and this is something for a lot of runners to understand. He warned me that there will be a period like April and May where you're going to feel like garbage. And in July as well, you're going to feel terrible with the heat. But you just got to keep persevering and following the plan, And to add to it, that was also the year my Staten Athletic Club had Frank Shorter stay as our guest 3 weeks before the Blue Marley run. And Frank stayed at my house and went for runs with Frank. So, how great is that? I'm being coached by Tom Fleming and running with Frank Shorter. So I came to that race very hyped up. And
I can't hear anything you guys are saying.
We lost Dick's audio.
Mike, did you hear me now?
I hear you great.
All right.
So we're up to about our end of our time, and so I'll probably I'll open up for Dick. Have you ever considered Jeff?
Just to finish, by the way, I did run 15:20 at the Blue Marley run, and I won the race that day. So So I'm aware that people run a lot faster, but as Tom Fleming says, you were the man on the day. And
have you ever thought of writing a book, Jeff, about some of these adventures and stories that no one else but you know?
Yeah, thinking about it. I
know it's on.
I'm going to collaborate with my friend Larry Eater. Some of you know the publishing world is a really other tumultuous world. You could do the Amazon link, which the Centrowitzes did. They have their book like Father Like Son on Amazon, right? You got Frank Shorter's autobiography from about 8 years ago through Rodell Press. He went through Rodell Press. Craig Virgin came out with Virgin Territory, right? Great. Dick, you also went through a publisher, right?
Yeah, he can't hear you.
Okay,
he did. You went through the University of Minnesota. Was generous, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of time involved, and just we'll see what happens. But the good news is I'm still able to write articles, and I do put stuff up everywhere. So a lot of stuff's recorded. And for some reason, at least for now, at my age, I'm 60, my memory is still sharp. I actually do remember stuff, okay? I might not remember to take out the garbage last night, but you asked me who's won 143 for 800, I could start up.
You're just like the rest of us.
Yeah, just crazy. So, hey, you know what? I did want to
Dick, we hear you just great.
Yeah, I did want to promote something really quick. I got this book.
Oh, hang on, Beards.
Yeah. I got this book from Paul Larkins. Paul Larkins was a British runner who ran in the 80s, I believe, in the United States. I forget the school. I tend to say Wisconsin. But he became like a pace setter, and he was part of the European circuit for a while. And he was like the rabbit at some of the Oslo races where the world records were set. So he wrote his first-person thing here, Running in the Shadow of the Gods. And I haven't gotten to read it yet, but it looks like a really solid book. And there are, as you know, Dick knows too, there are great, solid books out there. If anybody's looking for inspiration, I tell some of the best runners in the world when I speak with Jared Maguse especially, I'm like, study the history. Because eventually you'll be in a situation and you will look back and say, well, that person was in that situation. How did they do it? Sebastian Coe always
said, good advice.
After Seb Coe got the silver medal in the 1980 Olympics at the 800, losing to Steve Ovett, where everyone thought he was going to win it and everybody was ripping him apart, Seb said, I realized, I still had the 1500 to go, and I realized that had I been Jim Ryan in 1972 and fell in the 72 Olympics, my Olympics would have been over. So Seb is a student of the history. He knows all that stuff. And the history, the wealth, knowledge that is out there is a lot if you're willing to do a little bit of reading once in a while.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, listen, we could go on and on.
Right?
This has been absolutely wonderful. We can't thank you enough for being on our podcast. We want to thank everybody for listening today. And if you have any questions for Dunn or myself or comments about our show, you can contact us directly on our website at beardsleyanddunnpod.com or leave us a comment or on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dunn Pod.
And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, we'd love to have you leave us a comment or subscribe. And Jeff, thank you so much. I knew you would be an awesome guest, and you were beyond expectation.
I've been very lucky in my life, and I love to share those experiences with everyone.
I thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
You guys have a great day.
You too, Mike.